Welcome, and thank you for joining us for Human Kinetics webinar, How to Add Muscle Where You Need It Most. My name is Alexis Kuntz, and I'm the Associate Director of Social Media and Marketing at Human Kinetics, and I'll be the facilitator for today's presentation. The webinar is scheduled for 1 hour, and the session is being recorded and will be available for playback. By the end of the day tomorrow, you can expect an email containing the link to the recording. Due to the large number of participants today, you'll be able to hear me and our presenter, but you will not be able to speak directly to us. If you're having problems with the audio, you may call in by clicking the Use Telephone option in the audio tab and dialing in with the number and the audio pin provided. You may also send questions at any time through the Questions tab or the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll allow time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session. To submit questions during the webinar, use the question function located above the chat function. We're looking forward to a great presentation today, but first I'd like to give you a little bit more information about our presenter. Chad Waterbury graduated from the nation's top-ranked Doctor of Physical Therapy program at the University of Southern California, where he currently teaches the course Resistance Training Techniques for High-Performance Athletes for the Master's Degree in Sports Science program. He's the owner of Chad Waterbury LLC and author of Huge in a Hurry from Rodell Publishing. Waterbury has lectured for fitness organizations such as the National Strength and Conditioning Association and Perform Better. He has a master's degree in physiology from the University of Arizona, where his focus is on neurophysiology of human movement and performance led him to make radical changes in the way he trains competitive athletes, as well as non-athletic clients. His workouts are now shorter and faster, producing superior results in strength, power, and muscular development, while at the same time inducing less fatigue and allowing for shorter recovery periods between workouts. Chad is also the author of Elite Physique. And I'd like to note that for those attending today, you will receive a discount code in an email, or I can tell you now it's Elite20 if you'd like to purchase the book off of our website. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chad.
Okay, well, hello to everyone out there listening and everyone who will be watching this soon. I'm here because, as Alexa just said, I wrote a book called Elite Physique for Human Kinetics. And it was an excellent project, and I'm very happy with it. In fact, I got a copy right here. So today we're going to talk about how to add muscle where you need it most. And in the book, there's a chapter called Body Part Specific Training, where I really delve into all the details of adding muscle in specific parts of your body, whether it's, your calves are lacking, your biceps, or whatever it is. But before I get to that, I just want to give an overview of how I recommend people train to build muscle anyway. So for the most part, I mean, a huge population of people I've worked with over the years, I can honestly say that 3 full body workouts a week really hits the sweet spot for most people. Of course, there's always outliers here, but for most people, 3 full body workouts a week is what you want to have as your foundation. Now, what is a full body workout? Well, I define it as it's an upper body push, an upper body pull, and then a squat, lunge, or deadlift variation. So like a chin up, dip, deadlift. That's an example of a full body workout. Or a overhead press, row, lunge. There's another example. Of course, you can add many more exercises to that workout. It doesn't mean that you can only do 3, but you need those 3 to make it a full body workout. So after a period of time, if you do it right, eat right, you're going to put on a good amount of muscle, build strength, right? That's what we're after. But almost all of us have limitations somewhere in our body. Maybe we're born with naturally small calves or biceps or what have you. And even though you're following the full body principles, that muscle group, that lagging muscle group is not getting enough stimulation, enough volume to really get the growth that you're after. So that's what today is all about. It's on top of your full body training plan. This is something you would add in, okay? So that's why what I'm gonna go over, very simple, it's not gonna take a lot of time, because if you're gonna start focusing on building a muscle group, You don't want don't want to induce a lot of fatigue throughout your body, right? So we want to make it something simple, something you can do every day, and something that your recovery can easily manage. So here we go. Now, this all came about, when I say this, I mean learning how to add muscle in specific parts of your body. This all came out in Las Vegas in 2001. I'm going to tell you the whole story of how this came about. This was the birth of high frequency training. So by 2001, I was living in Tucson, Arizona. I had a training business. I had a lot of clients that I was working with, athletes and non-athletes alike. And I've been a trainer professionally for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years at that point. Everything was going well, but like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people that just weren't getting the growth that they wanted in certain areas. I had one guy whose calves were small. I had another guy who really wanted a bigger chest, but was having a hard time building that. And it was my job as his trainer to figure out what the problem was. So I was doing the usual 3 full body workouts a week, and all that was fine, and maybe adding in a couple extra sets for those lagging muscle groups. But honestly, I knew that it could be the growth, what I could be doing could be better. I just wasn't really sure how to approach it. So this goes back to Las Vegas. So in 2001, a good friend of mine and I went to see the Cirque du Soleil show. The show is called Muscular. And at that time, there was a lot of talk about it, and Cirque du Soleil was relatively new sort of in the world at that time, and a lot of people hadn't seen her, they didn't have a lot of shows or whatever. So this Muscular show gained a lot of popularity. And some people that I know who went to the show said, oh, Chad, there's this routine that these 2 brothers do. They've got these incredible physiques and you're gonna love it and it's just gonna blow your mind. I'm like, all right, that sounds pretty cool. So my buddy and I went to Las Vegas and we saw Muscular, and I'll never forget when the 2 brothers walked out on the stage. And I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever seen 2 better physiques on any men on earth. I'll start with that. Absolutely incredible. You see a picture here of them. But I'm like, all right, let's see what this is all about. So then they started their routine, and they would lift. One brother would lift the other brother up, and then they would do all these crazy positions and movements, lifting and lowering the other brother, and it was so cool. Like one brother would lay on his stomach like he was doing a lying leg curl, and the other brother would be doing a handstand from his feet, and he would curl his legs up and down while the guy was doing a handstand. It was just absolutely incredible. And I'm like, all right, these guys have amazing physiques, absolutely incredible strength. And then I started thinking, man, I remember looking at tickets for this show, and there was like 10 shows a week that I could pick from. 2 shows a day, I think 5 days a week. And I was just thinking, my God, these guys do this crazy routine that you would think would just shred their muscles and their joints. And they're doing this twice a day, 5 days a week. I'm like, how is that even possible? I don't care if or what they were supplementing, taking whatever. In my mind and with what I was taught, that was like not even possible. So I thought, all right, maybe I'm shortchanging what my clients are actually capable of doing in terms of frequency and volume. So that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to start doing a higher frequency of training for my clients' body parts that were lagging. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do 6 days a week. So we already have the 3 full body workouts, and then 6 days per week at night before they go to bed, I'm going to give them a simple exercise that they can do from their home. And, we'll just see how that goes. So that's what I started with. Now, the other important thing before I get to the details of what I had them do and all that was this genesis of my high frequency training principles really came with me observing the world around me to try to be as intelligent as I could with my clients in doing this approach to building their lagging body parts. So I thought about athletes that have proportionally large development of a given muscle group. And I try to think about what it is that they do that maybe we're not doing. So here you'll see a speed skater. If you've seen speed skaters or downhill skiers, it's another example. They have huge quadriceps, all right? Every one of them has huge quadriceps. So, you know, they're doing a lot of skating, or in the skier, the downhill skiing. They're doing it virtually every day, or we'll call it 6 days a week. I mean, even pro athletes usually take a day off each week. But they're putting a lot of tension on their muscles, but they, you know, they're not doing anything super crazy, heavy, high intensity. They're just getting a lot of volume. So for the speed skaters and downhill skiers, I thought, okay, when it comes to the quadriceps then, or just the thighs in general, I'm not going to add in something that's super high intensity, like a really like hard 10-second set, which I might do for an explosive athlete or something. Instead, I'm going to do a longer set to failure. Because obviously I couldn't tell these people to start training like a speed skater or like a downhill skier, or start cycling 5 hours a day like cyclists with huge thighs have. I had to make it, you know, practical. So I thought, all right, the quadriceps, we're going to say that those are going to be really long sets to failure. So I had my clients do a split squat each night before bed, because it doesn't require any extra load. You do it slowly, you do it to failure. It really burns the quads out. You know, it's easy to do at home. You can do it anywhere if you're traveling. And that worked, you know, really well. And I talk about that exercise in Elite Physique. But then I started thinking about other muscle groups. And I thought about the biceps, of course, because every guy wants bigger biceps, right? We all know that. But I started thinking about athletes that do very high volume, very high repetition, e.g. the downhill skiers, the speed skaters just talking about. And I thought about their biceps development. And a good example would be a rower. So think about, you know, a collegiate rower, you know, obviously doing thousands and thousands of reps of the rowing, and how much the biceps are working when he or she does that motion. And it wasn't really that impressive, the biceps development of those people that I consulted with or saw videos of or whatever. Whereas like a speed skater, they all just have like amazing thighs, right? So I thought, well, maybe then the biceps, for one example, needs a slightly different approach. Maybe just doing a very high rep set to failure isn't ideal. And I have this photo on the screen here for a reason, because this is a rings gymnast, and they have, I think, undeniably, unequivocally, pound for pound, the best biceps on the planet. And I'm very confident in saying that I'm pretty sure everyone with great biceps development just didn't merge towards being a rings gymnast. In other words, these massive biceps were built from this rings training, from this tension they're putting on their biceps, doing these holds, doing all these positions. And if you've seen rings gymnast routine on TV in the Olympics or whatever, you'll see that it's not like a speed skater where they're going super fast and doing tons of reps. They're basically going from one isometric hold to the next. They might do an iron cross where their arms are out the side, and then a Maltese, and all these crazy, crazy positions that puts a huge amount of tension through the biceps, okay? but not for long periods of time. They'll hold the position maybe 5 seconds, get out of it, hold another position. But this gets back to what I was trying to figure out with my HFT principles. Thought, okay, am I going to have to end up with a different approach for each muscle group? Some would say that you would benefit more from high rep exercises for the lower body because they generally have more type 1 or endurance muscle fibers, and that's why you should do it anyway. Others would say you really need to look at the muscle fiber makeup of each muscle in general, build your reps and plans based on that. And at the end of the day, I thought, okay, I can't make this too complicated, so I'm just gonna do one set to failure for my pay. I'm gonna have my clients do one set of failure using about 60 reps for an exercise at night if we're trying to build their lower body. If we're trying to build their upper body, it's gonna be 30 reps, okay? Same general principle, a high rep set to failure, but with the upper body stuff, you're just gonna get a little bit more attention. If you have an exercise you can only do 30 reps with compared to 60. So I had them experiment with that, and for the most part, it went really well. There were some exceptions, and I won't get into all the exceptions, but some tweaks I had to make here and there, because I go over all that in the body part specific training chapter in Elite Physique. But it really started to become like a big part of my programming for anyone who wanted muscle growth, because virtually everyone out there had some body parts, something that they weren't happy with, something that wasn't responding as well as other parts of their body to the overall program. So I want to share 3 principles with you here on HFT, high frequency training, if you want to incorporate it into your own plan. The first and most important, and this is basically what I was mentioning before about some little tweaks I had to make, was the most important principle of HFT is to choose joint sparing exercises. I like to say exercises that overload your muscles more than the joints. Because if you're going to be doing something every day or 6 days a week, or as frequently as you should be, 5 to 6 days a week, and doing a high rep set to failure, which I'll get to, it needs to be something that doesn't beat up your joints. Now, many guys want a bigger chest. That's why I'm showing this exercise here. I'll give it away right now and say this is my favorite HFT exercise for building the chest, for building the pectoral muscles. It's a 1-arm band fly. It's great for 3 reasons. First, it really isolates the chest, the pectorals. Second, it only requires a band. Even if you're traveling, you can throw the band in your bag, whatever. All you need is just something to attach the band to, and you'll always be able to find that in your house or wherever you are. Just attach the band to chest height. Third, it matches the strength curve of this movement. So if you look at position A, and the arms out to the side, this is actually the weakest joint position for him for this exercise. You look at position B, where the arm is in front, he can generate a lot more tension here. In other words, he could be pulling a band that has significantly more tension than it has in photo A. And that perfectly fits a band exercise where, as you move through the motion, there's more tension put on the band. So it, as we'd say, it perfectly matches the strength curve of this exercise. So you get a great peak contraction where the band is maximally stretched, giving you maximum resistance where you're strongest. Perfect. Now, while I'm talking about this, I'll mention one exercise in particular that I don't like for the band, and that is a standing row. So people have said to me in the past, oh, I've got some bands, I'm traveling, I want to build my upper back. Can I do like standing rows with a band? So you can imagine if he would turn to his left here, okay, and he's then facing the band, he's got the band in his left hand. And imagine he just starts doing a one-arm standing row. That is opposite of the strength curve of that movement. So he's actually strongest in the beginning of the motion and weakest at the end, which is the opposite of what the band is doing. The band is giving him virtually no resistance in the beginning, lots of resistance at the end, where he's where's the weakest motion. So the point of that is when I outline the exercises that are ideal for each body part, there's really a method and a madness to all of it. And that was just one quick example there. Second principle. So once you have found a joint sparing exercise, an exercise that overloads your muscles more than your joints, and you found an exercise you like that really targets the muscle group you're after, second principle is perform at least 30 reps to exhaustion, or momentary muscular failure is what we call it. I've just found through all the experimentation that I've done that you need at least 30 reps per set. And what was interesting was that some research came out a few years ago showing that you can get equal levels of muscle growth with high rep training as you do with heavier low rep training. But the key was the set has to be taken to momentary muscular exhaustion or failure. That is the key. Another way to say it is the muscle must be burning by the last rep. If you would do, let's say, 13 or 14 reps to failure, even if it was a joint friendly exercise, I have found that you just won't get enough burn in the muscle to really elicit the hypertrophy response that you're after. Because again, we're talking about a very stubborn muscle group that we're trying to build here. By the way, that burning in the muscle, it's not lactic acid that's building up in the muscle or lactate. It's actually an accumulation of protons that accompanies the rise in lactate. So I won't get into all that. I talk about that briefly, but the point is the muscle must be burning by the end of the set. Back to what I was saying earlier when I was talking about do I need different principles for like the lower body or the upper body muscles? I've found that any stubborn muscle will respond to the principles, the system I laid out in Elite Physique. And it's basically the same for each muscle group. I found it just works across the board. It's very simple and people really generally like it. So that is very important too. All right, so what do we have so far? Joint sparing exercise, perform at least 30 reps to exhaustion. Then I have people add more reps over time. Like for instance, I was born with very like naturally small calves, and all my life I've worked to help offset that because I live in California, I like to wear shorts, all that stuff. So at this point, what I did to build up my calf size and what I do to maintain it is I do one set of standing calf raises from the floor, no shoes on, every night. I do 100 reps, and that's been great for me. So you don't necessarily have to do that. I talk about ways to maintain your gains. If you don't want to do one set of an exercise every night, I just don't mind doing it because it takes like 2 minutes, and I just do it before bed each night. But the other option is that you can make those 30 reps more challenging. You can do various holds and accentuate the negative and all these things that I talk about in the body part specific training chapter. So there's the first two principles. Third principle is to perform one set to failure using the parameters we just covered, and 5 to 6 days per week. It needs to be at least 5, and I generally do not recommend more than 6. I don't recommend you do it every day, even if you want to do it. I just found that extra day off, that one day off a week, people just tend to respond better. I don't know if it's because that period, it really gives the body a chance to upregulate more protein synthesis after the 6 straight days or what it is, but just do 6 days per week, but at least 5. So I originally started with every day or 6 days per week with my clients. And then I merged back as far as I could in terms of, all right, I'm going to back this off to, I went down to 5 days a week and then 4 days per week. And 'cause it needs to be at least 4 days per week. By the way, my definition of high frequency training is training a muscle group 4 or more times a week. Because if you look at the general research, general programming, most workouts programs have you training each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. So for me, high frequency training would be 4 more times a week. But I just found that 4 days per week just wasn't enough, and 6 was pretty much ideal. But a lot of people got good results with 5 days per week. Again, doing this one set to failure outside of their workout. Okay, I told them to just do it at night, sometime at night before bed, unless they did their full body workouts late at night before bed, which some people did. In that case, I had them do it in the morning, because your one set, your HFT set, you want to have it as far away from your main workout as possible on that day. Okay, so let's say you're doing full body training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when you do your HFT set, have it be at least 6 or 8 hours away from your main workout. So I think that probably makes sense. The other thing is, I still had people hit that muscle group, hard in their full body workout. So if a guy wanted bigger calves and he was doing one set of standing calf raise to failure each night, just from the floor, then in his main workouts, I'd have him do, heavy one-legged calf raises from a step, maybe just doing, 4 sets of 6 to 8 reps. Have them do depth jumps, which is great for your calves development, all that stuff. So what I want to emphasize here is this lagging muscle group you're trying to build, you're still training it in, quote, traditional ways during your main full body workouts, like 3 times per week. But the HFT is separate from those workouts, and 6 days per week, and it's a lighter set, higher reps taken to failure. Okay, before we get to the questions, I just want to go over a few things here. One of my favorite professors always said, if you're going to give a presentation, you need to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I just want to do a quick overview of everything we just covered here. The point of HFT is to build a muscle group that hasn't responded to traditional ways of training. You want to be sure that you choose an exercise that spares your joints, because I've had a lot of people try to override this and be like, no, I'm going to do HFT for a barbell bench press, or there's lots of examples I could give. Basically big compound exercises that put a lot of stress through the joints. And there's a time and a place for those exercises, absolutely. I mean, they're programming elite physique, but you want to spare your joints, because it's very easy to have little nagging stuff, joint pain creep up on you. I guess my next point is, if you're doing HFT for any given muscle group, you want to be sure you take care of that joint. So if you're doing it for your biceps and you're doing bicep, curl variation every night, you need to make sure that you really are taking care of your elbow. Get extra soft tissue work done on there. Just be very cognizant of how your elbows are feeling. As I always tell my patients, Little problems can turn into big problems, and often do. So you might think, oh, I've been doing this HFT for biceps. It's great because my biceps are responding well and they're getting bigger. But I'm starting to feel a little like ache on the inside of my elbow, but it'll probably be fine. I'll just work through it. I'm telling you, don't work through it. Be sure that you have someone in your life that can give you good soft tissue work, or a physical therapist who can analyze something or whatever, because if you get something like golfer's elbow, for instance, or tennis elbow, or any of these things don't go away quickly, and I want you to be able to keep doing these HFT sets and drills, because that's what we're after. I'm trying to help you build the ultimate body that you want to build. Second, as I talked about, you're going to do at least 30 reps of a set. I get asked this all the time. Can I do more than one set? And my answer is, well, you can, but probably shouldn't. Because if you do the set correctly, as I outline in Elite Physique, and do all these things to make it more challenging, and it's really burning by the end, you will have done enough to elicit that muscle growth for that day, let's call it. Because one of the things that was really cool that I found back in 2001 when I went on this whole journey to try to figure out optimal HFT parameters was, it was really cool how little in terms of time you need to put into a muscle group to elicit more growth if you're doing it right. So do just one set to failure. Start with an exercise you can do at least 30 times. Another thing I want to point out is these don't need to be full range of motion reps. Eventually, I want you to get to that point. But let's say you want to do an exercise for your calves, and you're going to do the standing calf raise, one-legged standing calf raise off the floor, and you can't do 30 full range of motion reps to failure. I mean, before hitting failure. Most people can't, especially if they have small calves. So what you do is you just go fast. You stay in that mid-range and you do partial reps, gauging it correctly so you can hit at least 30 reps. And then over time, you'll see when you get stronger and start to add more muscle, you can go through a greater range of motion. And then after the weeks or months or what have you, then you're doing them through a full range of motion, all 30 reps. And that's cool, that's progress. And then you'll add in the principles I talk about in the book for making those sets harder, or you do like I do and just go up, just keep adding a lot of reps, going up to maybe 100 reps, and then you just maintain that over time. And then the third principle, as I said, is to do it 5 to 6 days per week. I just all the time get asked, just like I get asked, can I do more than one set? It's just like, no, I want to do 7 days per week. I'm like, oh, that's fine. But people almost always, when it's all distilled out in the end, they're like, yeah, it's like 6 days per week probably would have been better. So I'm trying to help you avoid all the mistakes, pitfalls that I did with myself and with clients early on trying to do this. So those are the 3 principles. I think now will be a good time to take some questions. So let's get rolling with that.
Okay, thanks, Chad. We've had quite a few questions come in while you were talking. So I'm just kind of going to start with one of them we had received earlier. And it was a question regarding, this person happens to be over the age of 55. And they're looking for strength or muscle improvements for body composition for an endurance athlete. So perhaps something that they could be working on since they're more endurance based.
Okay, so this is a good question. This goes back to the work I would do with a lot of endurance athletes, a UFC fighter, or whoever it is. And I think this is a mistake that I made early in my career, and I think that this is maybe a mistake that some other trainers and coaches out there are making. if you're trying to build muscle and strength, the parameters don't change regardless what type of an athlete it is. So for instance, if I'm working with a UFC fighter and I'm like, well, this guy needs a lot of endurance, needs to be able to recover fast and all that. But if he needs more strength in the, like if I test his deadlift, I'm like, it's way too low or whatever, I'm going to use the same principles to have him build that deadlift as I would a power lifter. It doesn't change just because he needs endurance demands of the sport. In fact, what research has shown is if you take an endurance athlete and build his or her maximal strength, which is the ability to basically lift a heavy weight for 1 to 5 reps. If you build that person's maximal strength, it will carry over into better endurance, because essentially what happens is the capacity of the muscle to produce a certain amount of force goes up significantly. And in relation to whatever sport you're talking about, cycling or whatever, now the gap between the force a muscle is capable of producing and what you need to produce in the sport is even greater. So it makes sense you could do more reps. Sort of like if a guy wants to, like, let's say a guy comes to me and, or gal, doesn't matter, but a person comes to me and can do 9 pull-ups and says, my goal is to do 20 full range of motion pull-ups. I've learned, and this is through studying with people like my colleagues like Pavel Tsatsouline and people like that, sharing all their data with me, that if you just focus on building their 2 to 3 rep max of the pull-up and you build that significantly, that will immediately give them more endurance in the pull-up, get them up to those 20 reps without even training those 20 reps. And if it wasn't clear, the analogy I was making, building the gap between what the muscle is capable of and what it's actually doing in the sport, a good example would be if I took a 5-pound dumbbell and just started doing curls with it, I could do, lots of them. It'd be super, super easy. I could just do them, keep going. If I give that 5 pound to my 5-year-old nephew and have him curl it, which I did recently, he grabs it and he's like, oh, and he like kind of pulls it up, right? So that's a good example. It's so easy for me to do those curls and do them for lots of reps because my biceps are capable of producing so much more force than is required for that activity compared to my little nephew, who his capacity for force was, very, very close or maybe even below what he needed to lift that dumbbell, which is why, it was more challenging for him. So what I would say to that question is I would still follow the same strength and muscle building principles as I outlined in Elite Physique, regardless of what type of athlete it was. Their endurance should come from their sport. That's what I always say. The best endurance is going to come from doing your sport. So do the strength and muscle building, as I outlined in the book, and then make sure that that person's getting plenty of work with their sport in question. Then beyond that, if that's not an option, or if the person is looking for more specific info related to building endurance, then I would get into the list, the low intensity steady state, and the interval training guidelines that I cover in the book as well, and how to program that in the workouts, which is another whole discussion in itself.
Okay. All right, so we had another question that came in regards to those 30 reps that you talked about earlier. The question is more, and you did discuss this, but if it's 30 reps straight or if it's 10 reps 3 times to failure.
No, it is 30 reps straight. I'm glad that question was asked, because remember when I was talking about the speed skaters or downhill skiers or the cyclists, it's like, I was thinking, okay, they're getting a lot of continuous tension on their muscles, and that's what you need for these sets. 3 sets of 10 will not have the same effect. It will be less effective than 1 set of 30 reps, because this goes back to the 3 principles or mechanisms of hypertrophy that my friend Brad Schoenfeld has talked about so many times. It's mechanical mechanical tension, which is what you get, when you're lifting heavier weights and all that. It's muscle damage, and it's metabolic stress. So essentially, with these sets to failure, you're getting muscle damage and metabolic stress. Of course, there's always tension through the muscles too, but the point is you want to get everything that causes the muscle burn. I'm trying not to get off on a scientific tangent here. Everything that causes a muscle burn, you need to ramp up. And if you split those 30 reps into 3 sets of 10 reps, you're going to let that stuff stay low. But we want it to actually shoot up high, because we want the metabolic stress through the muscle to elicit the hypertrophy response. So that's my answer.
Okay, so we have a question that came in about recovery. So they're asking about recommendations to improve recovery if they are training 5 to 6 days a week, or 6 days a week, and if they should use the list and hit strategy recommended on fat burning phase, if that's the best, if they're still if they're concerned about recovery as well.
Well, recovery comes from, there's an old joke in bodybuilding circles is, there's no such thing as overtraining. There's just under eating and under sleeping. So the first thing I would say, the most important thing for recovery is to make sure that you're sleeping at least 8 hours a night. I highly recommend that you get some sort of device, whether it's one of those rings or it's the wristband or whatever, to check your heart rate variability and get that information to see how well you're sleeping, your quality of sleep. There's actually a section in Elite Physique where I talk about sleep hygiene. It's towards the front of the book for a good reason, because it's one of the principles of good training, good health in general. So to optimize recovery, you want to be sure, that's the first thing. You cannot, if you have the best training, the best supplements, the best diet in the world, nothing can offset poor sleep or a lack of sleep. So I just cannot beat that dead horse enough. Speaking of sleep, like a 30-minute nap after your workout, I found is absolutely the best way to boost recovery. So maybe you have to work late, or you have kids, or all these other demands in life, and you just can't get 8 hours of straight quality sleep. Be sure you find a spot to put in a nap. I mean, just make it a priority. But if you take a 30-minute nap within like 2 hours after your training, that will significantly speed up your recovery, significantly. It's amazing when people can do that. I know might not be convenient, but it's really, really important. And then, of course, nutrition. You got to have optimal nutrition, which I have a whole chapter of that on the book, where you have to keep inflammation down and all this stuff, and feed the muscles and the nervous system everything it needs for optimal recovery. And once all those boxes have been checked, the lists, low intensity steady state aerobic recommendations I give in the book, that's what I would recommend to help speed up your recovery. And then Alexis, you said, was there another question there? Were these two separate questions? One was, how do I improve recovery, and is lists and interval training?
Yeah, is lists and HIIT or HIIT training recommended on the fat burning phase? I'm trying to, yes. Strategy recommended on the fat burn, the muscle gain. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so it absolutely is. I recommend that everyone do some sort of energy system training, regardless of your goal. Even if you're lean and you're just trying to build muscle or whatever, none of us are getting any younger, and we need to have optimal cardiovascular health. And there's just lots of ancillary benefits to doing various forms of energy systems work. Granted, if you're a super skinny guy and you're trying to add a lot of muscle, I wouldn't have you going out and jogging for an hour, 3 days per week, but I would have you do other forms of the energy systems training. But especially when you're trying to lose fat, it's essential that you hit all these different energy systems because they all work in different ways to optimize fat loss. So weight training hits one aspect, low intensity cardio hits another, energy systems training hits another. So to make the complete picture or the complete circle, you need all forms of that to optimize fat burning when you're in the fat loss training stage.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in, what exercise would you recommend that is joint friendly for lower body if you have knee problems already? Should you isolate each individual muscle, or can you do a compound movement to hit everything?
Okay, so what I need to know there is what muscle group is he or she trying to build? Is this about the quadriceps or about the hamstrings? If I'm just gonna assume it's about the quadriceps.
There's another question about the quadriceps also, so we're just gonna group those. Let's go with that as your body part you're focusing on then.
Okay, so what I recommend, if you don't have any knee issues at all, one exercise I love, as I mentioned earlier, is the split squat, just the body weight split squat. If you have knee problems, I recommend you do a step up because that will take a lot of stress off the knee while still stimulating the quadricep. And when you're doing this, when you're stepping up onto something, a box or whatever, you can really manipulate the angle of your knee joint to take any stress off of it. Whereas like a lot of other squat variations, you're going to get a lot of stress with the knee joint at the bottom. For a step up, you don't get that. So it works very well. And just go, the higher the step, the better. I understand if you have knee problems that you're probably going to get to a point on the step that it might aggravate the knee. But in keeping with that, the other end of the spectrum, you don't need a large step to get a lot of quadriceps burn. Again, we're after the muscle burn. So if you do short reps, even like a 6-inch step, if you just keep let's say you're working your right quadriceps, your right foot is up on the step, and you're just stepping up, your right foot constantly stays on the step. You're just, with the left leg, you're just going up and down, tapping the top, tapping the bottom of the stair. And even just a short little step, which is very little stress on the knee, you can get a lot of activation through the quadriceps. So that's what I recommend when you have knee problems.
Okay. So we have somebody who had commented on the fact that they have a left-right imbalance in their muscles. So they're wondering if HFT training would work if perhaps one side is stronger than the other. Should they only train that side, or what is your recommendation for helping to fix that imbalance?
Yeah, that's a very important aspect, something that I've dealt with a lot over the years. People come to me and one side, one biceps, one quadriceps, one calf is significantly smaller than the other, and they're not sure why. They've trained them with the same amount of intensity, or maybe they do know why. Could be like a previous injury of that joint or whatever. But this is a very important point, because if you have one muscle group that's significantly smaller than the other side, it's almost certain there's some sort of neurological impairment. And that doesn't need to sound scary, because it's not a scary thing, it's a very normal thing. But what I mean is, you're gonna really need to find someone who's qualified to really work on the deep tissue and the fascia, understand nerves and nerve gliding and all that, because that will make a world of difference. The analogy I give is that muscle group that's smaller, that has neurological impairment, it's like you're kinking a garden hose, right? So you kink the garden hose a little, and instead of the water pouring out the end, now it's just trickling out. The same is for that neural input to that muscle if we're talking about the left pec. And because let's say it's significantly smaller than your right, that's almost always going to have diminished neural input, meaning the signal, the strength of the signal coming to this is impaired. It's like the water is trickling out of the garden hose. So then you're not able to recruit as many motor units and muscle fibers, and that's what's holding it back. So it's really tough to just try to power through that without getting some really good soft tissue work. That being said, I've actually seen some really cool, pretty, honestly, like astonishing things I wasn't even expecting for people who had a left-right imbalance and just started doing the HFT, the one set to failure, 30 reps. In this case, actually, I'm gonna sort of break one of my rules. In this case, with this person with a neurological impairment, I had him do it actually 3 times a day instead of, as I said before, just do it once a day. I had him do it 3 times a day, but just for that one side. The reason is because he had the impairment and he wasn't getting the sort of metabolic stress or muscle damage that he could on his other side, which should only be once a day. So it makes sense, right? So you're really diminished on this side, so we just have to do more to try to funnel more neural input through there. And he actually did super well, and he wasn't even getting the soft tissue, the deep tissue work very often. And within like 6 weeks, he had, I think it was 6 weeks, his left side was equal to his right. And he said it had not, he tried everything for years, and this is a well-known, sophisticated, smart trainer out there who speaks and all this stuff. So he was really blown away, and I was too. I wasn't sure what to expect without getting the soft tissue work. But to go back on my original answer, just assume you have some sort of neurological impairment. Find someone who's qualified for deep, to do the deep tissue work, who understands nerve dynamics and all those things, knows what to feel for. Get that cleaned up. And, in this case, you could do the HFT sets multiple times per day until you start to see, that muscle growth start to take place. You can still just do it once a day, but honestly, in this case, I would probably do it, a few times per day, 6 days per week. So that's my answer to that question.
Okay. I'm going to try to combine 2 questions here, somewhat similar. One person is asking if HFT would interfere with a strength cycle. And then we have somebody who's also asking, would it interfere if they're a power athlete and they're more doing explosive training? So kind of the same thing. Is HFT going to interfere with these types of focused training?
Well, I would need more detail for that question, because it would have to be, what are they doing HFT for and what is the sport? So for instance, if you're a power athlete and you're doing heavy squatting throughout the week and you're doing HFT for your deltoids, your chest, it's not going to hurt anything. But if you're doing HFT for your quadriceps and you're trying to build your squat, it could lead to some extra fatigue that might impair it. It's like, in my mind, like, I want to say no, because I know how to program it in the right way where it wouldn't, but I'd have to know, again, more specifics about like what exercise they're trying to build, what type of athlete we're talking about. But I'm going to give just a broad answer and say that if you choose very specific isolation exercises that really just focus on the muscle and not the joint, as I keep saying, like the ones I outline in Elite Physique, and you just do one set and you just do like 30 reps and you don't really push it really, really hard to failure, you just kind of like go for the pump, go for the quick burn, it should not interfere with a power athlete or whatever. But there are exceptions, I'm sure, but I'd have to know more about, again, what muscle you're trying to build and what type of athlete and that athlete's sport and all those sorts of factors. So hopefully that was a sufficient answer. I apologize if it wasn't.
Okay, we have time for one more question. And this is, again, in regards to HFT training. The question is, can you do more than one body part simultaneously with HFT training?
Yes, I get asked that all the time. How many different muscle groups can I do? And I say 2. That's it. You're only 2, no more than 2. That's the max. So chest and calves, or whatever, biceps, deltoids, all that. Once you get beyond that, you're just inducing too much extra fatigue outside of your main program and all that. So 2 is the max.
Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up then. I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. And Chad, thank you for a great presentation. If you are interested in purchasing his book, Elite Physique, you can go to our website at us.humankinetics.com. So as an attendee of today's webinar, you receive 20% off the book using the code ELITE20 at checkout. So thank you again for joining us, and be sure to grab a copy of Chad's book. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.